Try again now, Julie.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, we're there.
Woo.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Julie. Are we good to go? Streaming? All right, we are ready to roll. So we are going to officially call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, July 6th, 2021. Let's start with Clark indicating who's here.
Clark Nelson.
Chris Wynn.
Connie Burgess.
Sorry, Nicole McDermott.
Terry Bodden.
Julie Jackson.
Rich Nye.
David Garrett.
And Karen Winder. Thanks to those who are joining us today. We have, this is an exciting time as we are officially welcoming our new superintendent, Dr. Rich Nye, today. And our first item of business is I will be giving him his oath of office officially as the superintendent of Granite District. So we're going to do that now. All right. If you'll raise your right hand and say, I state your name.
I, Richard Nye.
Having been appointed to the office of Superintendent, Granite School District.
Having been appointed to the office of Superintendent in the Granite School District.
Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend.
Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah.
The Constitution of the United States and of the State of Utah.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
And I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Congratulations. This is called tall and small.
Welcome, Dr. Nye.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Congratulations, you're officially stuck with us now. All right, so we have two items following the oath of office that just took place, two admin reports. The first one is administrator placement and selection process. This is going to be given by John Welburn. Little background. We requested every month there's appointments, and especially kind of the month of in the spring is really busy as the administration works on placement of new intern, assistant principals, principals as employees retire. There's gaps, and so their board has been asking questions on a little bit more in-depth understanding how that process, everything from the initial hiring of an employee down to, maybe somebody applying for a district position, all of those good things. So John has prepared a little slideshow for us to address some of those questions.
Thank you, President Winder. For those that may be watching, I'm John Welburn. I'm the Assistant Superintendent over School Leadership and Improvement. And since I play a large role in this process, I've been asked to give this presentation. I'll go ahead and just indicate when I'd like a slide to go forward. So let's go ahead and advance the slides. This is the timeline that we typically follow each year. So as the board president mentioned, we do have folks in our district every year that retire, which creates openings. Our timeline typically is in October, we post for administrative positions. And I'll go through each of these items more in depth. I just wanted to start off with the timeline. Then in November, we have an initial screening. December, there are two things that take place. We have interviews with the superintendency, and then we ask our administrators to declare what their intent is for the next year. Then in January, we conduct an interest inventory, which is sent out to each of our administrators. And they, at that time, could also indicate whether they plan to retire or if they're looking for a change in placement. They might be looking for a transfer, just a different experience. Then in February, we meet with, I meet with my division, which includes all the school leadership improvement directors, also the director that's over onboarding. And then I seek feedback also from the other assistant superintendents. And I also, at that time, look for some community needs that they might have or input from communities. For example, if we know that we're going to have an opening at a high school or a secondary school, oftentimes I'll meet with the community council. February, we meet, I just covered February. We also offer open contracts to top candidates based on retirements. In March, we fill district office positions. April, we fill the school administrative positions, and then May, through August, we're still filling the remaining openings that might take place. So let's go ahead and advance the first slide, and we'll talk more in depth on the postings. Postings for all school level administration positions typically takes place at the beginning of October, and it will run for 3 weeks. Word typically gets out not only in our district, but neighboring districts as well that we post, and we post the same time every year, so folks pretty much know when to be looking for that. And since it runs for 3 weeks, then the word gets out. We also ask that each of our principals let their interns and their assistants know, and so word also gets out through word of mouth. Yes.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question on that? Is that just for general administrative positions, not something specific, correct?
Yeah, so what we do is we post generally for all levels of administration, high school principal, high school assistant principal, junior high principal, junior high assistant, elementary assistant at that time, okay? And those are general listings. They don't have a specific school that's attached to it. It's just the general posting. This posting is both for internal candidates and for external candidates. So anybody from other districts can apply, or those that are looking to go in administration for the first time. The Human Resource Department screens all applicants to make sure they meet the guidelines and that they have the appropriate certifications and endorsements. Okay, now that screening, if Donette were here, and I'll just speak on her behalf because she and I have worked together on this for years. We typically get over 200 applicants, okay? Then from that, all qualified candidates then move on to the screening process. So we're going to talk a little more about the screening process now.
Hey, John,
Yes.
what % of those 200 would be internal versus external?
I'd say on average, we probably get about 35 to 40 that are internal, the rest are external, okay?
And John, about how many new hires do we have? How many of those people do we end up hiring?
That's a great question, Julie.
I know it varies year to year.
Yeah, it does vary year to year, but over the last 5 years, we've been on average between 11 and 15 that we hire.
That's individual as a % of the 200.
As individuals. Good clarification, Clark, not as a percentage. Yep.
Well, but we hire more than just 11 principals and assistant principals every year.
Actually, I'm looking over at Rick because he and I crunched the numbers. That is both assistant and principals that we typically have about 11 to 15 new people that we hire.
And you mean new, meaning not internal candidates?
No, I'm saying both with the internal and the external. These are new. When I say new, they're replacing a retiring principal or an assistant principal, so they'll be new to their position.
So John, can I just clarify? So that's not including like transfers, because we get a lot of transfers at the same time as hires, and so sometimes it looks like
Yes.
it's both. Okay.
So
Yeah, that's what I was confusing. Thanks, Chris.
yeah, so that's a good point of clarification, Chris. For example, this evening, we have something that we have to do. We have 2 new appointments, but that caused 4 other transfers. So that'll look like 6 when there was really only 2. So, and I'll talk a little bit further about that in an upcoming slide. So with the screening of the administrative perspective candidates, typically this takes place in November, and it has 4 components to it. The screening has 4 components to it. There are supervisor ratings. So we typically ask for each candidate, the past 2 supervisors provide us a rating on each candidate, okay? Then there's a scenario that is scored using a rubric, and that's done by a panel of individuals that are typically made up of some of my directors, the school leadership improvement directors. There's also administrators in-house that hold different positions. For example, Aaron Wilson may sit on that committee, or we may have folks from either division, either Leslie's division or Rick's division, sit on that panel. The scenarios are different from year to year. And typically we look for something, for example, last year it might have been something to do with COVID. They just pick an issue or a current scenario that an administrator might be faced with, and they present them with that scenario and see how they would respond to that. Then the third component is an online interview. That's called the Principal Insight. We refer it more often as the Gallup. The Gallup's actually the company that made the online tool. Many districts across the country use this tool. And what it does is candidates are given 45 minutes to answer a series of questions. And what's nice about it is it provides some consistency because all candidates are asked the same questions. And since it's scored by this computer program, there's no bias at all in it at all. It takes it all out, and there's nobody knows the candidates, or and then it determines in different groupings the potential each candidate might have for leadership. Okay, and then that score is also factored in the screening process. And then there's a written portion that is also scored using a rubric. So each candidate's asked to do a written response, and that's factored in too. Once they've done all 4 components of the screening process, they're given a score, and I meet with the HR director, and we look for a natural cut. And then we take wherever that natural cut might be, and I can tell you over the past several years, it typically includes about 100 candidates. Of those 100 candidates, I would say on average, about 35 to 40 of them are in-house, and the other 60 to 65 are from outside, okay? So then what happens from there, we'll go to the next slide, is we have an interview with the superintendency. So those 100 candidates generally that make it through the initial screening, then interview with us. And when I say us, the superintendency, it's usually Leslie, Rick, myself, and the superintendent. And we interview all of those candidates generally before the holiday break in December. We book out.
You interview all 100, all of you together, or
Yep.
separately? Wow.
No, all 4 of us book out several days. When I say several days, it literally takes several days, and we interview each candidate. And we use a rubric to score each candidate. And then after that process, I want to make sure I'm not jumping ahead here, they're entered into pools based on that scoring and that ranking. So we'll have, for example, a pool of candidates for high school principal, for junior high principal, for elementary principal, for high school assistant, junior high assistant, elementary assistant. And I do need to let you know that there are many candidates that end up in multiple pools because they may say they're interested in multiple positions. I'll get a little feedback here from the mic. So there could be a quality candidate that ends up in multiple pools because they have interest in multiple areas. But they could be, perhaps, I'm just going to share with you, a top candidate in one pool and maybe 8 or 9 in another pool. So it varies depending on their experience and their expertise and how they answer the questions. Okay. Then we also, at that time, I take those candidates and I check references, because for the in-house candidate, that's pretty easy to do. But for the external candidates, we have to reach out to folks that they've worked with and get more background information. So we look for reference and feedback in each of those candidates that are in the pools as well. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. Then the next slide talks about potential openings and transfers. December 15th is the deadline for all administrators, both in the schools and within the district office here, to declare whether they intend to retire at the end of the year or not. That's our deadline. Now, there are times when people will retire after that. But most of the time they understand that that's the deadline. That's when we need them to declare. If someone meets with us and wants to retire after that point, they need permission from the superintendent to be able to do that without being fined or receiving a fine or a penalty. Okay. And then in January, we send out an interest inventory to all of our administrators. They use this form to indicate whether they plan to, well, basically whether they are planning to apply for a position or have applied for a position, or if they hope to get a promotion, or if they may be interested in another experience, just a transfer. Okay. You might say, well, why would they want to transfer? Well, for example, our secondary assistants, whether they're a junior high assistant or a high school assistant, they're on the same pay scale. So they might be at a junior high and they might want a high school experience, or they may be at a high school and they might want a junior high experience, or they might be on an East Side school and want a West Side experience, or they might be on the West Side and want an East Side experience. And so there's a variety of reasons. Okay. I would say this is a nice tool for us to use internally. I know sometimes it can be hard for communities to hear that because they grow to love their administrators and they like them where they're at. But and so when we make transfers, it can be a little bit challenging and difficult as we do so. But we oftentimes do that not only to accommodate their wishes, but to give them opportunities for growth and different experiences. Okay. We also sometimes have a need just as a district for a change, and that happens as well. Sometimes what we're looking for is to balance teams. There are, in the high schools, there are multiple administrators, and so we have folks with different talents, and sometimes we're looking to balance those talents at different schools. I can share with you, for example, we look to try to put a Spanish-speaking administrator at each of our high schools where there are high percentage of Spanish-speaking students. Well, that is very beneficial for those teams. Okay. Then administrators both in the schools and at the GEC can also make their desires known to their immediate supervisor. Our principal supervisors or my directors meet with the principals frequently, and they can also just verbally talk with them about their goals, their aspirations, and their needs, and the directors share that with me as well. Okay, so there's both the formal process through the form, and there's the informal process through the communication. Okay. In February, I sit down with the school leadership and improvement directors, and I also sit down with my entire division, because Dr. Kinley, who's over onboarding, also plays a significant role because he works very closely with our interns. He also works with our administrators that may be first year, second year, third year administrators, and so he has some good insight that he can share with us as well. And we work closely with his department, and I also meet quite a bit with my colleagues to seek their feedback and input, because they may hear things that are pertinent, that are important as well. You know, the way in which administrators work with each of their divisions and departments helps too. Then GEA does share their feedback as well. I mean, you guys can only imagine, Star is not typically quiet. She typically shares with me, you know, and that's okay. That's good. And it's a good working relationship that we have. Sometimes there's just a need for a faculty to get a different experience as well in their school leader. And it's good for me to hear those things. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The initial hiring. So in February, in our Board of Education meeting, generally we do the first round of administrative hires, but those are typically in February candidates that are offered an open contract. So as you all know, other districts are pretty competitive and they like to snatch our people up if they can. We're the only district that has a comprehensive onboarding and principal development program to the extent that we do. They know that, the other neighboring large districts. And so when they get a chance, they would like to sort of steal from those candidates if they can. All right. So we like to get aggressive and lock in our top candidates as soon as we can, which is what we typically do in February. So what we do is we give them a contract, but we don't tell them where they're going yet because we don't know yet where the openings are going to be and exactly where the best fit will be. All right. When an administrator receives an open contract, they're put on the entry level admin contract. And then they're told that if for whatever reason, if it won't be an elementary assistant position, if it's a secondary position, then we just modify the contract as needed. That makes sense? Okay. And then we bring them to board meeting and introduce them to you when we make their placement. So that you can put a name and a face with the location. All right. That'll happen again tonight. We have a couple tonight. All right. Our next slide. Okay. So now we'll talk about assignments and transfers. In February and March, I also meet with my directors again, and then other colleagues, the other assistant superintendents. And then after we've given a lot of discussion and so forth, we propose what appointments that we need to make and what transfers should occur we run it past the superintendent. And then after Dr. Nye signs off on it, we then send it to you for your approval. Okay. Now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how this takes place, because there's kind of a series of dominoes that fall. In March, we typically have most of our district level positions done, which then helps us see where we're going to have needs elsewhere. Because usually the district level positions are filled with folks that are currently in our system. So it might be school folks that take those positions at the district office, which then creates the domino where we're going to need to fill positions out in the schools. Okay. Then in April is when you approve most of our school level positions, because at that point we know where the openings are. And we also do many of our transfers at that time. That's where most of it happened in the spring. But unfortunately, like some years, like this year, we've had multiple dominoes that have taken place. And so here we are, even as late as today, still making a few appointments and adjustments. Administrators that receive a promotion on their first assignment are recognized here in the board meeting, and transfers typically are posted in the minutes and in the next day. Ben usually puts those in the board report there for the transfers. The reason on that last bullet I put May through August, additional remaining administrative positions are filled, because we still look at those same pools that we established early on to fill any positions that may still occur. Okay?
Then are the applications, you have to start over again in October if you weren't placed this year?
Yes, so if there are folks, that's a great question, Connie. So there are folks that are in the pool currently that will reapply in October if they didn't receive the promotion they were hoping for. Or let's just say they're an intern, or there's a new candidate, or there might even be someone external that applied and they didn't get a position. They can reapply in October and they would be considered for next year's pools. Yeah. So, and that happens quite often. And we do have folks that successfully get a position when they didn't in the previous year. So we tell people, if they don't get a position, what they ought to do is look for an opportunities, perhaps to serve in other leadership capacities. Some might become an instructional coach. Some take on leadership positions within their school, and some that haven't interned look to do an internship. And so there's a variety of ways that they can continue to work on building their skills and their capacity so that they might be successful in the next year.
So I just want to make sure, as teachers, or if teachers are watching, debunk the myth, because amongst teachers, there's this ideal that every 7 to 10 years, a principal gets moved. That's more, it sounds like more along the lines of depending on what they feel like they need to do, and maybe what our directors and superintendency and
Sure.
everybody there feels
Sure.
like needs to happen.
Absolutely. So, but I would say, I looked at that because I kind of wondered if that question might come up tonight. I did look at this year, for example, on the number of transfers that we had, and I could say that all but one of those transfers took place at the request of the individual that was transferred, all but one. Okay. One individual, we went to them and okay, wait, that's not quite correct. There were two. That we went to them and asked them, we have a need for a placement. Would you be interested in a transfer? And they said, sure. If you need me to do that at this time, I'd be happy to do so. And there are times when we have a need as a district for a variety of reasons. It could be that we're looking for a fit. If someone has a particular skill set and there might be a need for that person's skills on a certain team or in a certain community or a certain school. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so it's interesting because I was just talking to one of our newly appointed principals this morning, and she was a teacher who then became an assistant principal who is now becoming a principal. And she said, John, it's really fascinating. When I was a teacher, I had a perspective of a classroom teacher. And then when I went into administration, it broadened a little more. I imagine it's going to broaden even further in this new role. And I said, absolutely. And I can tell you, now working in district office, that my, that my perspective has grown even more. Sometimes I'll have principals ask me, why don't you ask us for more of our input as to where we'd like to serve? And I say, well, we do. We ask for some, you give us some feedback, but we also have a perspective, big picture for the entire district that sometimes you may not have. Let me give you an example real quick. I once had a principal of a particular school that was really advocating very strongly for their intern to become an assistant at their school. They wanted their intern that they had, which is great. I'm glad they enjoyed the experience they were having with their intern and they wanted their intern. But I met with this principal and I indicated, hey, I need you to trust me. We've got someone in mind for your school that we think is going to be great. And this principal said, yeah, but this person's really great and I already know this person, blah, 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 blah. I said, you're right. I'm sure you do. And, but then we made the assignment and they got the new assistant that they hadn't necessarily asked for. And a couple months later, I met with this individual again And they said, thank you so much for assigning who you've assigned to my school. It's a perfect fit. I didn't realize this person was out there, and I didn't realize that this other person had these skills. And I said, yeah, because your perspective was with who you knew. We knew that person, but we also knew other people that might be even a better fit for your school. And so we sometimes need to have those conversations with them so they have a greater understanding. Yeah. We don't just randomly move people every 5 to 6 years or every 7 years. We don't. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. But I can understand why they feel that way, but when we do let's say we do have a need to make a move, we try not to move somebody that's only been there a short time. We do look to see, okay, if there's someone else that's been there for quite some time, that might be good to make a move. All right. Next slide, or do we lose? Okay, that's it. Good. Any questions?
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Right, next on the agenda, we're going to have a quick update. March of 2020, we had the earthquake on March 18th that did extensive damage to one of our schools, Westlake Junior High. So we're going to invite Don Adams, an assistant superintendent, and he oversees our capital plans or our buildings. He's going to basically walk us through, we're not going to get into the weeds of too many details here, but this is just some plans and the status of where we're at currently. Let's take it away, Don.
Okay, thank you. It has been quite a while since our earthquake, and a lot of work goes into a building replacement. And Westlake definitely has been a challenge. And let's go to the next slide, Brandon, if you will. Wanted to start out with what I think a lot of folks are very interested in, and that is the timeline involved. So we spent, frankly, an entire year in structural analysis and negotiations with our insurance company. You have to know the extensive amounts of damage that occurred. We call it disproportionate damage. The building shouldn't have suffered the way it did based upon the size of the earthquake, but the unique features of the site, the unique features of where the earthquake waves came from, did do more structural damage than one would have predicted if you were a structural engineer. And so as we went through that analysis, did all types of testing on it, and came back. John, you've cursed my microphone. I'm sorry. It's okay. Came back to a negotiation in which you were aware. We brought that settlement to you as a board in April, and that really started the time clock ticking on a replacement. So the board said, hey, let's take that insurance settlement and let's go build a new facility, because a remodeled Westlake just wouldn't be that remodeled and would have a bunch of upgrades that we'd have to apply with our own funding for code compliance, etc. And so what we started to go out and look for designers. So that selection through our procurement process took us roughly a month. And now we're into the design. And the discussions that we've all had, time being of essence and cost being of concern, it's more wise to look for a facility that can be replicated, that's already been designed or been used by a neighboring district. And we've done that, and I'll present that in a moment. And then, of course, we're midway through the selection of our contractors, both asbestos abatement and demolition contractors, to remove and raise the building. And so we'll demolish the building sometime through that August through December timeline. So the building will be down and the site will be prepared for the new vertical contractor. We'll wrap up design of the building in November. No matter what, even if you pick a school, you have a few things that you have to customize for the site, and maybe a few things that are a little bit different. One district doesn't necessarily use the same locks and security systems and teaching technology, and so we have some customization that will happen. And the plan right now is through January of 2022 through December of 2024 to do the construction, and then, of course, occupy a mid-year move starting in January. We're coming to you kind of forecasting out what the next schedule issues are. We'll do this board presentation. We've already set time with Tyler Howe to talk to his school community council about the plan and the process. In August, we'll schedule a community information meeting for all of the patrons of Westlake. Once school gets back in and we're used to coming back to our kids' meetings and discussions and give them information on the process similar to what we're doing tonight.
Just to correct, you said October. It's actually September is the
September.
community info meeting.
I'm getting used to
I'm
new
just
glasses.
for those listening online that they can't see
That's right. No,
anything,
that is
I just
great.
want to make sure they know.
These bifocal things make life jumpy, and I'm just old enough to have gotten into those, so what a challenge. And then we'll come back in October to the board and go over those finer details of, hey, this is how we've landed on everything. We're going out to bid, and this is what we presume in the construction cycle of the new Westlake. So again, through our process, we have a lot of great architects in the community, a lot of great buildings that have been built, and a committee went out, did a lot of tours of different buildings early on, looked at all the submittals from the architects, and in conjunction with the school's administration, selected, Brandon, if you would, the next slide.
Can I ask a quick question before you move on? In that forecast where you've got the construction ending in December of 24, does that mean that and realizing it's a forecast, would the students and teachers then return in January of 2025, or would it wait all the way until the following academic year?
We're projecting mid-year move to occupy in January of 2025. We'd like to help that school out as much as possible. They're in that, kind of retrofit elementary school with a bunch of additional buildings. We'd like to get them out sooner rather than later. And so we're predicting a mid-year move. We've done it before. Is it going to backfire on me now? We've done it before, and it's doable. We think it's the best move right now. So the prototype chosen is something that Jordan District has built, I believe, at least 5 times in one iteration or the other, and it's really the West Jordan Middle School, Hidden Valley Middle, Copper Mountain Middle School concept. And you can see what we've done is we've highlighted the old Westlake on the screen. You'll see that in red. And as we go to the next slide, you'll see how that fits with what a new sized building looks like and how it lays out on the site. So it is moving a little bit to the south. It will become, you'll have more visitor parking, different staff parking, separate bus circulation, and it still fits with the necessary field space as well. It is a bigger footprint school, and it is mainly 2 stories as well. So it's going to go from roughly 175,000 square foot Westlake to, let's call it 195,000 square foot Westlake. That's our goal. But one thing that we modify, we use a central kitchen. West Jordan cooks in their junior highs. So for example, that space will squish down. We just don't need as much kitchen space. And so you'll see some tweaks, but that's a rough idea of where we're going to be. Next slide, if you would, please, Brandon. So this is the schematic plan, and that's really what you look at as how all of the bits and pieces come together for your new district building. And I will apologize, as you looked on the earlier site plans, you'll have noticed that this building plan is mirrored. It needs to flip from what you're looking at West Jordan-wise, right? So we're going to flip it. We'll ignore the fact that it hasn't been mirrored on this handout, but that's part of the work we'll do. We have a good-sized school. We have teaching and learning neighborhoods. And so you'll notice that each of those pods, and I'm going to call it the medium blue, become a learning community. And the administration can determine whether or not they want to have mixed curriculum. Maybe, hey, this is where my 7th grade primarily circulates through English, math, history, science, etc. Or you can departmentalize that where this is where my math department's going to be. This is where my English department's going to be. So there's flexibility in how the administration determines where they want those students to be. And it's mirrored first floor and second floor. There's a communication stair in that pod that we use, frankly, not only to reduce congestion in the hallways, to get kids to and from a little bit quicker, but it's also a great safety and security issue, right? If we need to evacuate the building, we can close interior doors and we can just work within our own little pods for safety and security in lockdown situations, should we have it, or fire escape, should we have it. So it's a very good, prudent model for education, but it also has some great security and safety benefits as well.
So the one thing I noticed, Principal Howe likes that combined teacher units,
Yep.
and I didn't see that in this.
Right.
So,
Well, so the teacher collaboration hub is one of the additions that we plan on doing. And so I'll draw your attention on this screen to, in this case, it's the right-hand side, yellow color spot number 6. That's the library. And on the second floor, it doesn't have a second floor. And so we're going to incorporate a teacher collaboration hub as part of the library. The decision hasn't been made as to whether the library is going to be up or down, first level or second level, but the hub will be on the other level. My gut feel is that the library will be on the second level and the teacher collaboration hub will be on the first. That's just a gut feel right now as we're working with the architects and talking to the administration.
So the number 6, those, I guess I read that wrong, because I thought the collaboration areas, those are not teacher collaboration areas. Are those student collaboration areas?
That's the student collaboration. And so that's also a spot where, multiple classes could come together for large group instruction as part of that, should they want. And so those are the teaching neighborhoods, not necessarily the teacher collaboration hub.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah,
I did also have one more question, but Chris, you want to go first?
Oh, I just had a question. So this does include an indoor running track then on the second level above the gym? Is that open
correct.
concept where it's the open, you can see it from the gym floor up?
Oh,
Or is
yes,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
As you know, most gyms are quite tall.
Right, so it's
Volleyball, basketball, funny how all of those activities need that good high space. And on the perimeter, there is a running and exercise track. So even on rainy days, the PE requirements can be fulfilled. I will tell you, on old guy knees like mine, the corners are a little tight, but the kids do a lot better than I do.
Thank you.
I noticed that there was a lack of, there's a band room and a choir room, but there's no drama room. Are we not even planning on them ever having a drama department? Or I just was wondering why that was left out.
There are a couple of spaces, so the auditorium can function as the drama room. And then when you get into those large spaces at 14, the number 14s, a couple of those are just large vacant lab type spaces that can be converted for drama rooms as well. Okay, so it's all part of the calculus, but a lot of times that auditorium is set, and Jordan District does use that a lot for their drama folks just in the auditorium. But we have some space to use for those different drama type spaces if we need to.
I'm just going to put that out there that they need lots of storage room too.
They have as much storage as fire code will allow. How does that sound? And Brandon, if you wouldn't mind, let's just take a quick look at that second floor. Okay. So again, it's not as big on the second floor, but you are seeing we continue that neighborhood concept up and down. We have great CTE space, great art space, great business lab space, and the concept is designed should the community decide to configure to go 6, 7, 8, bring 6th grade up. This building's of size and designed with the intent to be a 3-grade building for that configuration. So there's plenty of future thought going into that as well. And you can see again on that far right over the library, you can see how much space we have to expand for, either that being the library or the teacher collaboration hub. Okay. Brandon?
Don, can you explain to me what a teacher team room is?
So the model that Westlake uses in the teacher collaboration has room, a workspace, open office concept for every single teacher in the building, and hopefully it's large enough to accommodate some itinerants, et cetera. So Tyler has been very fortunate in his master schedule creation, in which he will do common consultation periods for, let's call it math. He'll pull half of his math team or sometimes in the first year, he was able to pull his entire math team aside for common consultation so they could collaborate on their best practices, look at student data, and really work together as a team to deliver the best education value they could. And so that concept is again just extended in this particular, you could call it a teacher office concept, but it's more than that. You have common consultation, which we'll call the purposeful collisions. you're getting them together to work on certain things at a certain time. But we also have a lot of interaction that's an incidental collision. You walk past a colleague because you're always going to and fro that space, and you think to yourself, oh, you're just the person I wanted to talk to about student X. And you engage in just a quick conversation. Maybe they're doing great in history and struggling in science, and or you're working on a social emotional concern with that student. And so that's a great space for all of that to occur. And Tyler uses it in a very purposeful manner and really has, I think, been one of the strengths of how Westlake's been able to turn around in the last 5 years. Very, very good space. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess another question I had is, so in those teacher studio or those learning studios, do teachers have like, not ownership, but do they plant themselves in one of those studios, or do they move around?
So again, they'll have their classroom, but those collaboration spaces for students, those that are labeled number 6, are really where they can, there's visual acuity between the teaching, between the typical classroom space and the collaboration. And so if somebody needs to break out and do small group, or someone needs to break out and do a project, or if you want to get 2 or 3 classes together and do some large group instruction, that's the space where you would do that. So it's similar to the concept when you toured in the 2 new elementary schools. It's just based on a slightly smaller neighborhood than as many classrooms as we had in the elementary school.
Great.
Good exercise rooms, good dance room space here on the 2nd floor, shown in rooms labeled number 23 on the floor plan. And now we just wanted to give you a sample of what some of the interiors have been like in their quote unquote sister schools. They're light, they're airy, they have good use of natural light, good use of LED lighting, and really seem to allow for the kids to have a very good teaching and learning experience, and same for the teachers. That's very important. And we also believe that through the use of the metal frame, we can move some walls when we need to if learning styles change over the next 30, 40, 50 years. So that was a great thing about this, that the classroom wing itself had the ability to be modified without removing block walls, for example. So it's a very good structural design. It's also a very good and safe structural design when it comes to seismic activity. You can understand that since that earthquake, my team and I are a little sensitive to making sure that safety is part of all the design. And Brandon, let's just take a quick look at some of those exteriors. It's a fairly adaptable exterior. The brick block and mullion combinations. You notice one has a green, the others have some aluminum. We'll probably lean towards something that's complementary to its feeder school of Granger High School. And frankly, you can see the 2 schools from the 2 campuses, so we want to be a little sympathetic. So you'll see us take some design cues between the schools so it doesn't look like it's out of place.
Really quick, are we thinking of the Olene Walker and South Kearns, are we able to implement any of those, like the solar panels or how are we implementing that, or what are the plans for that?
So that'll be on the last slide where we can talk about that. Okay. No, good, great question. And I think the last slide probably benefits that. Now, let's go to the next slide, Brandon, if you wouldn't mind. I think the key takeaway here is you see a Copper Mountain floor plan model on the left-hand column, and then the Hidden Valley, which is their newest in Bluffdale, in the right-hand column. The key takeaway here is we're going to call it the teaching stations. We show 55 to 57. We're leaning towards, and Tyler agrees with this, the Hidden Valley Middle School arrangement to give the 57 teaching stations. We don't want to outgrow this. We don't want, even with grade reconfiguration. So you're seeing us go to that 57 teacher station model right now. And so you'll probably see us start to track that in the program. So we don't see a need right now to change the program from Hidden Valley to accommodate anything that Granite District needs. So that's kind of where we're headed. And we included it in your presentation for study behind the scenes, all the following columns. I didn't plan on going through and reading them to you and putting you to sleep tonight. And so, Brandon, if you wouldn't mind skipping ahead to what I call the risks slide. This is a very interesting construction climate in the country and very much in particular in the state of Utah, and surprisingly particular in the Wasatch Front. And so we're dealing with hyperinflation in all of our projects. And so holding budget is really the biggest risk that we face. We've seen hyperinflation in steel, copper. Now, I do have information that in the last 3 weeks, copper's gone up 13%. The copper wiring has gone up 13%. So that's a real life example of hyperinflation that we're facing. Drywall is expensive these days. All of our mechanical components, the heating and air conditioning systems are going up. And so to your concern about the green energy, if we have room in the budget to add photovoltaic panels, PV panels, we'd love to. In this bid climate right now with hyperinflation, the best thing I can do is get it what we call PV ready. I can build the roof structure appropriately to hold the panels. I can have the backbone wiring available to accept the electrical generation. I don't think that we can afford it with hyperinflation where we're at. I just quite honestly don't.
Can I ask, what are you seeing in the last 6 to 12 months in terms of escalation of prices for those PV panels?
The PV panels have not gone up in cost. Everything else in the building has. The PV panels have roughly stayed about the same per kilowatt, I'd say, for the last 18 months. That being said, there's some talk about who would be allowed to produce the material that makes the filaments, and could we import that from other countries? And they might start doing, for lack of a better term, embargoes on some of that material, which could, by the time we're ready for the PV panels, have a dollar impact on us. It's great, great question. The other item that we're worried about as a risk are very long lead times on basic materials. So the B decking, which is kind of that metal corrugated deck that we do the roofs, ceiling structures out of, and then the floor that we walk on the second level. That's a staple. That hasn't changed in design in decades and decades. But from a lot of projects we're seeing around, normally you could order it up in a few months. It's there. You're not afraid of it. 13-month lead time is what we're seeing on a basic construction staple. So we are worried about how we program the building out, how the contractor works with us, and how they pre-order their material and get it into the delivery pipeline, right? So that's a risk that as we talk about that mid-year opening, we're making some assumptions up front that the contractors will be able to get their material scheduling done correctly. And so a lot of coordination with the general contractor, very, very early procurement. And so they're allowed to order, and once it gets into a bonded warehouse, we can pay for it. So we'll probably encourage them to order sooner rather than later. That's important. Labor availability has also become an issue. So the trades are hard to find qualified persons in for contractors, and we're not able to see a lot of those trades coming in from neighboring states, even though it's a pretty decent sized project. They probably won't recruit labor from outside of the state. And so the contractors will be looking at our schedule and they'll be thinking to themselves, how do I staff it? And what they may do is they may come back and tell us, listen, if you want it built in this timeline, I can do it with overtime. If you want to extend your construction cycle by X months, I can do it in regular time. And yes, there's a cost with overtime. And so when we're coming back to you in October, we'll know more, because time has elapsed, and we'll have had more conversations with the contractors in the community and have a better understanding. So I do want us to go in with this with open eyes, all right? This is a challenging time to build. This is the right thing to do for the school and for the community. It will have its challenges, so we will have our discussions. And we will have a crystal ball that is cloudier than a glass of milk. It's going to be a challenge, but we're up for it and we're excited for it. And I know that the teachers and administration at Westlake are excited. And as soon as the kids come back and hear it and start to see pictures of their new school, they're going to be very excited. So great project, great challenges, and we're off to a running start to get this done now that we have our settlement. Yeah.
Thanks for your work on this, Don. I know
My pleasure.
it seems like we should be able to snap our fingers and have answers on this right, sooner than, what are we, 15 months out of the earthquake, or 6 to 8, I don't know.
A good long while.
Yeah, a good long while out of the earthquake, but it does take a while to run those diagnostic tests, and obviously it took months and months negotiating with our risk management, our insurance. So thanks for all you've done to
Our
get us to this
pleasure
point.
to help.
And the community is excited. I've had more and more people ask me, because when are we going to see something happen? And so we've been able to talk a little bit about that with them, and they just appreciate the efforts and excited to see it go forward.
We will, and we hope to have more information back from FEMA as well, because we're in their process as well because of the natural disaster, and it's a fun learning curve working with them. They're good folks. They really are. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Don. All right, that concludes our administration report section of our board agenda this evening. So we are going to recess, and the board will resume our meeting back at 7 o'clock in this very room, and we will see you then.
Hey, you guys, I'll just come back to this same link at 7. Is that right?
Yes.
See you in a bit, guys.